This is Democracy Watch. All right, so Mark, Donald Trump and his mouthpieces in the immediate aftermath of his conviction have already begun to ramp up attacks against the judge, the trial, the prosecutors. Given the fact that it's this very judge who's going to ultimately decide Donald Trump's sentence, is Trump shooting himself in the foot right now by going scorched earth against the one person who will be responsible for his fate?
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, as you say, the only person who will decide whether Donald Trump is wearing an ankle bracelet, picking up trash on the side of the Cross Bronx Expressway, or sitting in a prison cell in upstate New York. The only person who decides that is the judge. And so if there's one person you don't want to piss off, it's that guy. And if there's one time you don't want to piss him off, it's after you've been convicted, but before you've been sentenced. But look, Donald Trump wouldn't be who he is. He wouldn't be in the pickle he's in if he wasn't stupid about the legal system. You know, he may have other skills as an authoritarian, but when it comes to being a participant in litigation, his track record is actually not that good.
Is this the kind of thing that would impact a judge's decision in terms of sentencing? Like taking Donald Trump out of it, if a convicted defendant opts to rail against the judge prior to his sentencing, is that the kind of thing that could impact what that sentence would be?
Look, the judge is going to say that attacks on him are fair game. And he's going to say it's not going to affect his sentencing, that he doesn't care what he says about him. But the judge will also probably say, may very well say, that attacks on the judicial system do go into sentencing. That showing contemptuous behavior towards the court does go into sentencing. That violating gag orders does go into sentencing, and that saying that the jury verdict, which is viewed as sort of above reproach, right? Everyone is to respect the jury and the sanctity of that process. That does go into sentencing. So I do think he's shooting himself in the foot here.
Now, do you worry about Trump inciting violence against the jurors or the court staff, or just inciting violence in general now that we're in this period where, tensions are high and he's obviously very, exhibiting very hostile behavior against these people?
Yeah, I think you put your finger on it in the last question. The jurors are anonymous, and if Donald Trump doesn't want to spend years, and I mean years, in a state prison, he will not incite violence against the jurors. Like, if he does that, all bets are off. We're talking about a whole other category of offenses, whole other category of crimes that would carry very, very serious. I mean, the judges do not allow violence or threats or intimidation towards jurors. So that I think is one thing. What I do worry about, though, Brian, and I think we all need to worry about, and I hope that, politicians across the aisle or across the spectrum, although I hold that very little hope for Republicans, will tamp down the incendiary language we are hearing right now from Donald Trump and too many Republicans that could create violence more broadly. Not necessarily aimed at this judge or this jury, but they have created the conditions here for Donald Trump supporters to view this as an extrajudicial process, which is ridiculous because it was literally in a court. But they are portraying this as somehow outside of the normal process and inciting Donald Trump supporters. And so this is a time when responsible political parties, when responsible politicians should be tamping that down and saying things like, we may not agree with it, I don't agree with it, but it's the judicial process and we respect it. We respect the role of the jury in our system. We respect the role of judges in our system. So everyone needs to, whether they agree with it or not, sort of be in that mindset. But of course, Brian, that's not what we're hearing. In fact, the one Republican who issued that position last night,
Larry Hogan?
Yeah, was told that by the Trump campaign that his campaign ended. So I think that Donald Trump and his campaign are inciting, not quieting that kind of vitriol.
Okay, well, to that point then, does Donald Trump have any legal obligation to quell these calls for violence from his mouthpieces in the media, for example? We had somebody like Tim Pool just go on Twitter and post the word war.
Yeah, I don't think he has a legal obligation to quiet it or to quell it. Again, it may go into this judge's sentencing calculation, though. Because remember, one of the purposes of the criminal justice system is to punish, but another is to rehabilitate. Right? Those are both competing purposes of sentencing. And so when people show contrition, one of the reasons why they get lower sentences is the person has moved towards sort of a position of repentance and a position of rehabilitation. When they show defiance, then the idea is they need not only punishment, but they actually also need a sentence that will further rehabilitation. Well, his conduct now, whether he is inciting or tamping down, it may very well be part of that atmospheric. But of course, we've seen him do worse. And this is what my message is to the media. We have seen him do worse and be ignored. We wound up with a violent insurrection at the nation's capital because the media largely turned a blind eye, and
Yeah.
a lot of public society turned a blind eye and said, oh, he's just venting. Oh, that's just Donald Trump being Donald Trump. And eventually he wound up inciting a riot at the nation's capital, for which he got indicted. So is he under an obligation to tamp down? No. But is he under an obligation not to incite violence? Yeah, he's under a legal obligation to do that, and the media needs to hold him to that obligation.
Is it fair to say then that by virtue of all of these Trump acolytes and mouthpieces coming out and kind of inciting violence on his behalf, knowing that Donald Trump, of all people, is not going to turn around and say, like, okay, quiet down, we need to respect the rulings handed down by the court system, that they're kind of setting him up for failure because now atmospherically the judge can see, okay, he had the opportunity to quell the violence and he opted not to. He opted to kind of revel in it. And so I'm going to take that into account when I sentence, because he's clearly not repentant for what he's done.
Yeah, I think he's doing it. Look, I thought there was kind of a split screen on TV after the verdict. You know, you saw Donald Trump's lawyer actually try to tamp down. Like, if you actually looked at what he was saying, the words coming out of his mouth, you could see him worrying exactly about what you just said. He was trying not to get Donald Trump in further hot water.
Right.
But the people who Donald Trump thinks are his friends, and I'm sure Donald Trump didn't like his...
are actually screwing him over more than anybody else.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the people who think they're helping Donald Trump right now are not helping Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, all the Republicans saying how much money they're raising off of this, the incendiary language they're using to raise money, the stuff that you hear on Fox News, definitely not helping Donald Trump right now. And really doing him a disservice. But the oddity is they're also doing the thing that he wants them to do. So you can't really fault them. You have to fault him.
Right. I don't want to bury the lead here, but I think this is an especially important question in light of what we've been talking about. Do you think that Judge Merchan is going to be influenced by the threat of violence if he were to sentence Trump to prison, for example, a period of incarceration?
I don't think so. I think judges, particularly judges in New York, you know, they are used to those kinds of threats. You know, I mean, New York is not a walk in the park if you go to the his courtroom on a normal day. They deal with a lot of gang violence, violent criminals, mafia figures, organized crime, and I don't think he's going to be intimidated in the least by that. I think, if anything, like I said, it may cut the other way, and it will suggest that Trump has not learned a lesson. Trump is not contrite. Trump is not showing the kind of emotion you would expect from a man who recognizes that perhaps he made an error in 2016. I mean, there's a whole other narrative that Donald Trump could be doing right now, which is what you would expect someone facing a sentencing judge to do, which is say, look, I don't agree with the court's ruling. I don't think it was a crime, but I understand I made a serious error in judgment in sleeping with a porn star, and then trying to pay hush money, and also having my friend David Pecker buy off another woman I was having an affair with. And those were errors in judgment. And I may not agree that they were violations of the law, but I am genuinely sorry. I am sorry that I did this. I'm sorry I put my family through this. I'm embarrassed that I have put my son and my wife through this ordeal. And that is the posture of what you would expect a criminal defendant in his position to be. And will the judge hold it against him that he's not in that posture, and not even in the neutral, I have nothing to say posture, but he is actually vilifying? Yeah, I think it could affect very well how the judge views this in a sentencing context.
Yeah, I think it's just too overpowering his need to be the victim in every situation, which is especially ironic because, to your point, it wasn't Joe Biden who forced Donald Trump to have an affair with a porn star. It wasn't Joe Biden or any Democrat who forced him to pay out hush money. It wasn't Joe Biden or any other Democrat who forced him to cook the books, to hide this payment. Like, this was all. Donald Trump's a grown-ass man who's running to be the president of a party that bills itself the party of personal responsibility. If that guy can't take any responsibility for his own actions inside, for a very, what I'm sure was a very exciting 30 seconds inside of that hotel room, then I don't know what to tell you, but Joe Biden wasn't there and he had nothing to do with it.
Look, the other thing about this that needs to be clear is it's not just that Joe Biden, first of all, Joe Biden had nothing to do with this entire case. Like, this was prosecuted by a local DA in Manhattan.
In fact, the DOJ passed on it.
And the DOJ passed on it. If Joe Biden wanted to go after Donald Trump, I was about to say that, you would have expected the Department of Justice, when it brought the Cohen case, to have brought this. And Alvin Bragg didn't immediately seize on this case. Like, Alvin Bragg wasn't even eager to bring this case. It was only after he really saw the extensive nature of the evidence. Remember, he originally was pretty cool on the case, and ultimately brought it only after he saw how strong the case was upon a closer look. But the other thing is, Donald Trump is a New Yorker. Donald Trump hasn't been dragged into a courtroom in some blue city in some state that he doesn't know anything about. This trial wasn't in Portland, Oregon. This wasn't in Portland, Maine. It wasn't in Rhode Island. This is in the city that he was born in and he was raised in, that he called home, and that he proudly believed he was lording over for years upon years upon years as a real estate developer and then as a celebrity. And if ever there was a case in which someone was judged by a jury of their peers, it was this case. He was judged by a jury of other New Yorkers for conduct that he engaged in as a preeminent New Yorker. And so he has no one to blame but himself. He can't blame the he can't blame the White House, can't blame President Biden. He can't blame the system or the jury pool. He was convicted of his jury's appeal in New York on charges that fit New York.
Couldn't have said it better myself. With that said, we'll leave it there. For those watching right now, if you want to support the work that Mark and his team are doing, which is especially important, focuses on the courts right now, which is ground zero for these attacks against our democracy, most of which are led by Donald Trump himself, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. It's an amazing news outlet. I use it on a daily basis. I'm Brian Teller Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.